So students have done their introduction, and now they're doing their exploration. And so this is what they should have by the end. Now, I'd like to get students just to predict. They're going to have to explain 5 things in their exploration. Can they figure out what those 5 things are? And just give them a minute or two just to see if they can predict. And then we chalk and talk. What are those 5 things? So this is what they have to explain. I would also just remind students, it's a good idea to use bold headings and subheadings to format their report. It just helps it give it a clear layout, makes the examining and assessing much easier, and it just looks more professional, I think. There's an activity in the files if you want to do this. I think it would be a good one to do. It's got, as usual, made up students. So I've just written some good explanations and poor ones, and then they read through for each of them and choose which one's better and why. First of all, they should, I think, work in pairs and say, okay, I think this one's better, this one's better, this one's better. And then afterwards, look at the similarities in those they thought were good and say, right, what makes a good explanation? What do you have to do? And why I like this activity is without giving them, these are also experiments that they wouldn't be able to do themselves because they're about taking drugs and taking coffee. So I like this because they're reading examples of good explanations without reading things that they would write directly themselves, if that makes sense. They can't just copy and paste it, is what I'm trying to say. But they are getting a good modeling here in this activity. All right, and then just maybe a bit of chalk and talk, go over their answers. What do they think makes a good explanation? And so to explain, right, they have to state, use a precise vocabulary. Like, what was it they did? Right, and then how did they do it, and why did they do it? Okay, and then so if we explain the design, okay, they have to state the design type, use a specific vocabulary, right, how they used it, and then why. And then here's an example, right, so that we state repeated measures, we described how we did that, then we talk about why, using the vocabulary to control for participant variability, because, and here is my reason. Okay, now, interestingly, the exploration is only with 4 marks, but actually it's going to be the longest and possibly the most time consuming. So yeah, it is tricky. If you've got the time, you might even want to do this over 2 lessons, because to do this properly for 5 things, it could be quite tricky. It's about 600 to 700 words, I think, for a good exploration. We just see here, this is the example. All right, and then the rest of the lesson up to students to just to write. Now, ideally though, it shouldn't be that tricky if they've been keeping up the workbook. The workbook has spelled all this out and given them space to explain their choices along the way. So the more they've been working throughout the course, the easier. This should just be a matter of, literally just writing it up. Okay, now if they haven't, I would say their homework should be at least to have the notes for each section, right? So for the participants, design, sample, they've at least got the points that they're going to make in the digital form of their final draft. And then we get into writing up the analysis.